Hello and welcome to Mrs. Pam Reads. Look at that. I changed the camera battery so quickly. How about that? There we go. There's the beginning sign. All right. Welcome to Mrs. Pam Reads. We are going to continue with chapter 13 in the book A Man Called Ove by Fredrik Backman. In the beginning of the chapter, well, a couple chapters back, the neighbor fell off the ladder. And so in the beginning of this chapter, Ove has driven the family, wife, very pregnant wife, and 2 daughters to the hospital. And the wife has told Ove that he needs to watch the girls while she goes to see her husband. So the littlest girl has asked him to read a story. And the older girl said, you've got to read, what is it? You have to say what happens on the page and do the voices. All right. And Ove says, what Oh, he clears his throat mid-sentence. What voices? He corrects himself. Fairy tale voices, replies the 7-year-old. You swore, the 3-year-old announces with glee. Did not, says Ove. Yes, says the 3-year-old. We're not doing any voices. Maybe you're no good at reading stories, notes the 7-year-old. Maybe you're no good at listening to them, Ove counters. Maybe you're no good at telling them. Ove looks at the book, very unimpressed. What kind of nonsense is this anyway? Some talking train? Is there nothing about cars? Maybe there's something about nutty old men instead, mutters the 7-year-old. I'm not an old man, hisses Ove. Clown! The 3-year-old cries out jubilantly. I am not a clown either, he roars. The older one rolls her eyes at Ove, not unlike the way her mother often rolls her eyes at Ove. She doesn't mean you, she means the clown. Ove looks up and catches sight of a full-grown man who's quite seriously got himself dressed up as a clown, standing in the doorway of the waiting room. He's got a big stupid grin on his face as well. Clown! The toddler howls, jumping up and down on the bench in a way that finally convinces Ove that the kid is on drugs. He's heard about that sort of thing. They have that attention deficit hyperactivity disorder and get to take amphetamines on prescription. And who's this little girl in here then? Does she want to see a magic trick perhaps? The clown exclaims helpfully and squelches over to them like a drunken moose in a pair of large red shoes, which Ove confirms to himself only an utterly meaningless person would prefer to wear rather than getting himself a proper job. The clown looks gaily at Ove. Has Uncle got a 5-kroner piece, perhaps? No, Uncle doesn't, perhaps, Ove replies. The clown looks surprised, which isn't an entirely successful look for a clown. But, listen, it's a magic trick. Do you have a coin on you, don't you? Mumbles the clown in his more normal voice, which contrasts quite strongly with his character and reveals that behind his idiotic clown is quite an ordinary idiot hiding, probably all of 25 years old. Come on, I'm a hospital clown. It's for the children's sake. I'll give it back. Just give him a 5 kroner coin, says the 7-year-old. Clown! Screams the 3-year-old. Ove peers down with exasperation at the tiny speech defect and wrinkles his nose. Right, he says, taking out a 5 kroner piece from his wallet. Then he points at the clown. But I want it back, immediately. I'm paying for the parking with that. The clown nods eagerly and snatches the coin out of his hand. Minutes later, Parvana comes down the corridor to the waiting room. She stops, confusedly scanning the room from side to side. Are you looking for your girls? A nurse asks sharply behind her. Yes, Parvana answers, perplexed. There, says the nurse in a not entirely appreciative way, and points at a bench by the large glass doors leading onto the parking area. Ove is sitting there with his arms crossed, looking very angry. On one side of him sits the 7-year-old, staring up at the ceiling with an utterly bored expression, and on the other side sits the 3-year-old, looking as if she just found out she's going to have an ice cream breakfast every day for a whole month. On either side of the bench stand 2 particularly large representatives of the hospital's security guards, both with very grim facial expressions. Are these your children? One of them asks. He doesn't look at all as if he's having an ice cream breakfast. Yes. What did they do? Parve wonders, almost terrified. They didn't do anything. The other security guard replies with a hostile stare at Ove. Me neither, Ove mutters sulkily. Ove hit the clown! The 3-year-old shrieks delightedly. Sneak, says Ove. Parvana stares at him, aghast, and can't even think of anything to say. He was no good at magic anyway, the 7-year-old groans. Can we go home now? She asks, standing up. Why, hold on. What clown? The clown! Beppo, the toddler explains, nodding wisely. He was going to do magic, says her sister. Stupid magic, says Ove. Like he was going to make Ove's 5 kroner coin go away, said the 7-year-old elaborately. And then he tried to give back another 5 kroner coin, Ove interjects, with an insulted stare at the nearby security guards, as if this should be enough of an explanation. Ove hit the clown, Mum, the 3-year-old titters, as if this was the best thing that had ever happened in her whole life. Parvana stares for a long time at Ove, the 3-year-old, the 7-year-old, and the 2 security guards. We are here to visit my husband. He's had an accident. I'm bringing in the children now to say hello to him, she explains to the guards. Daddy fall, says the 3-year-old. That's fine, one of the security guards nod. But this one stays here, confirms the other security guard and points at Ove. I hardly hit him. I just gave him a little poke, Ove mumbles, adding, bloody fake policemen, just to be on the safe side. Honestly, he was no good at magic anyway, says the 7-year-old grumpily in Ove's defense as they leave to visit their father. An hour later, they are back at Ove's garage. The lanky one has one arm and one leg in casts and has to stay at the hospital for several days. Ove has been informed by Parvana. When she told him, Ove had to bite his lip very hard to stop himself from laughing. He actually got the feeling Parvana was doing the same thing. The sob still smells of exhaust when he collects the sheets of newspaper from the seats. "Please, Ove, are you sure you won't let me pay the parking fine?" says Parvana. "Is it your car?" Ove grunts. "No." "Well then," he replies. "But it feels a bit like it was my fault," she says, concerned. "You don't hand out parking fines. The council does." "So it's the bloody council's fault," says Ove, and closes the door of the sob. "And those fake policemen at the hospital," he adds, clearly still very upset that they forced him to sit without moving on that bench until Parvana came back to pick him up and they went home. As if he couldn't be trusted to wander about freely among the other hospital visitors. Parvana looks at him for a long time in thoughtful silence. The 7-year-old gets tired of waiting and starts walking across the parking area towards the house. The 3-year-old looks at Ove with a radiant smile. "You're funny," she declares. Ove looks at her and puts his hands in his trouser pockets. Uh-huh. You shouldn't turn out too bad yourself." The 3-year-old nods excitedly. Parvana looks at Ove, looks at the plastic tube on the floor of his garage, looks at Ove again, a touch worried. "I could do with a bit of help taking the ladder away," she says, as if she was in the middle of a much longer thought. Ove kicks distractedly at the asphalt. "And I think we have a radiator as well that doesn't work," she adds. A passing thought. "Would be nice of you if you could have a look at it. Patrick doesn't know how to do things like that, you know," she says, and takes the 3-year-old by the hand. Ove nods slowly. "No, might have known." Parvana nods. Then she suddenly gives off a satisfied smile. "And you can't let the girls freeze to death tonight, Ove, right? It's quite enough that they had to watch you assault a clown. No?" Ove gives her a dour glance. Silently to himself, as if negotiating, he concedes that he can hardly let the children perish just because their no good father can't open a window without falling off a ladder. There'd be a hellish amount of nagging from Ove's wife if he went and arrived in the next world as a newly qualified child murderer. Then he picks up the plastic tube from the floor and hangs it up on a hook on the wall, locks the sob with the key, closes the garage door, tugs at it 3 times to make sure it's closed, then goes to fetch his tools from the shed. Tomorrow's as good a day as any to kill oneself. And that is the end of chapter 13. I do hope that things are going to turn around here for Ove. I did not realize that this book was so much about the possibility of taking your own life. But I have every confidence, because it's such a wonderful book. It's like top 10 of all the lists. I have every confidence that Ove is going to be fine. And I have a feeling it might have something to do with that 3-year-old. But we shall see what happens in the next video. Thank you for joining me today for Mrs. PM Reads. Remember, if you have not yet, to go ahead and subscribe to the channel and then click that little bell button so that you'll get an update when a new video posts. I do hope you have a wonderful day, and I will see you next time.